everyone, and welcome back to Plain Talk. I'm your host, AJ Rivera, and today I'm joined over the phone by Mr. Ed Packard. Mr. Packard is a Republican candidate that is running to be Alabama's Secretary of State. Now, Mr. Packard, we are very excited to be able to speak with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your campaign and about why you're running?
Well, I was a state election official for almost 25 years in the Secretary of State's office. I started back in 1997 when Secretary of State Jim Bennett was in office, and as you know, he was the longest-serving Secretary of State, and I really admired him and what he did while he was in office. I have a master's in public administration with a specialty in election administration. That was something that colleges weren't teaching back when I was in school, but when I was at Auburn, there was a professor there named Robert Montjoy, who was a national expert in election administration, and he worked up some elective courses for me so that I could do what I wanted to do, which was to actually be an election official in the state of Alabama. A lot of that grows out of the 1986 the Democratic primary runoff election for governor when Charles Braddock and Bill Baxley were running. And for people that remember that, there was a big controversy around that election. The Democratic Party threw the results of the election out, handpicked Bill Baxley as our candidate. There was a backlash across the state of Alabama, and we elected our first Republican governor in 112 years. That made me very interested in elections and made me want to be an election official. So I switched from wanting to be an aerospace engineer to being an election official. So that's a little bit about my background. My dad was in the Air Force, so he moved around a lot, but I spent most of my childhood in Auburn and then eventually went to the university. I live in Prattville now.
What separates you from the other Republicans that are running for Secretary of State?
Well, the main thing I think that separates me from them is just my length of service to the people of Alabama in elections. I've been working on election administration in Alabama for 29 years. I also had 1 year with the North Carolina State Board of Elections. And then, of course, I was with the Secretary of State's office almost 25 years, working in the elections division, helping out with some of the other divisions in the offices like business services. And they just don't have that experience. I'm ready on day one. That's an office where I don't think you should need on-the-job training to get in, although a lot of people that get elected, they don't have any experience in the office. But I'm actually the first person in probably 30 or 40 years, or maybe 50 years, who actually has experience in running. Agnes Baggett and Mabel Amos, they used to run for Secretary of State and auditor and kind of trade off. And so they had experience when they went in, but I believe I'm the first person since them who actually has the experience to just step into the office on day one and do the job on day one.
As you know, and we've discussed a little bit, the Secretary of State is the chief election official within Alabama. If elected, what would you do and how would you approach balancing election security with voter turnout?
Well, I think we can provide for election security and election integrity without jeopardizing expanded voter participation and that sort of thing. I don't see that those are mutually exclusive goals, but of course, we have to be willing to respect the laws on the books and enforce the laws on the books to maintain election security and integrity, and just making sure that the people that register and the people that vote are following the rules, and making sure that the election officials are following the rules as well. Now, there are some things that need to be done to kind of tighten up on the system. Like, I do believe we should have post-election audits after every election, from president all the way down to city councils and city school boards, so that the people know that their elections are being conducted appropriately. I do think that we need to ban the ability of our voting machines to be connected to the internet. Right now, that's not illegal, even though the Electronic Voting Committee in Montgomery has agreed not to certify any machine that has that kind of technology in it. That's not illegal, and we need to go ahead and make that illegal. And then I also believe that the Secretary of State's office should be granted investigatory powers and subpoena powers so that we can work with the Attorney General's office or the district attorneys to be able to advance cases to where they're more ready for court than, the Attorney General, the district attorneys, they have a lot on their plate. So I think we should be able to help them with that. And there's precedent for that in terms of an executive branch department having that kind of power, and that's the Ethics Commission. So that's not something new to Alabama. I just think it needs to be expanded into the Secretary of State's office. But further, we need to help people understand what the rules are that govern elections, how they can vote, what benefits them, but also what's not right. So we do need to expand voter education in Alabama so that people do understand what they can and cannot do. And then we need to encourage people to be vigilant and let us know when they see something, kind of like that saying, see something, say something, that they use in the law enforcement community. We do need that in elections as well.
Now, how do you propose that we increase voter education here in Alabama?
Well, there's some easy nuts and bolts things that we can do. First of all, I think the Secretary of State's website needs to be expanded. There's a lot of information about elections and election rules that aren't on there. For example, both on the website and in the voter guide that the office publishes, it doesn't even tell voters and their employers that voters are to be given at least an hour off from work to be able to vote on election day. It needs to be expanded also in terms of what can and cannot be done in terms of voting and voter registration. Also, I'm going to propose, and actually, if I get elected, doing a poll worker training video that outlines everything poll workers do on election day, but then make that available to the public so they know the way the election should be run in their precinct. And then if they see something that's not in accordance with what they learned on the video, then they can report that either to their probate judge or to the Secretary of State's office directly, or maybe even to the Attorney General. Now, one other thing that we need to do so that we can have kind of a preventative effect on voter fraud and election fraud, we need to stiffen the penalties. Right now, if you go and litter on the side of I-59, that's only a $500 fine. Well, if you buy my vote, that's a $500 fine. If I sell my vote, that's a $500 fine. That's absurd. The penalties need to be stiffer so that we can deter people from doing bad things. Additionally, I would say that anybody convicted of a felony election crime, they should lose their right to vote until they get a pardon from the State Board of Pardons and Paroles. Right now, you do not lose your vote at all for committing a felony election crime. And I don't want the middle ground either, where like right now, there's certain felonies where you lose your voting rights, but once you complete all the terms of your sentence, you can apply to the State Board of Pardons and Paroles to get your voting rights back through a certificate of eligibility. I don't think we need to do that. We need to treat election fraud at the felony level, just like we do murder and more serious crimes, where you lose your right to vote until you actually get a pardon.
Moving on to the other side of being the Secretary of State, there are many tasks that go on behind the scenes. Examples include being the personal notary public for the governor, as well as handling and maintaining business records across the state. What would be your approach to that part of the office?
Well, certainly, acting as the notary, so to speak, for the governor, there's not a lot that can be changed there. That's just a ministerial duty that'll need to be done. In terms of the business services, I want to go in and reevaluate all the fees that businesses pay to the Secretary of State's office, because as you probably know, a few years ago, the current Secretary of State worked out an agreement with the legislature where they took the Secretary of State off budget, and the Secretary of State operates on the fees that it takes in. I would like to reevaluate that and see if there's any fees that we can reduce and lessen the burden on our business community. Because basically, everything, my understanding of the office from my years in there, and with this change, everything in the Secretary of State's office is being funded through those business fees primarily. That includes the elections division. And we need to look to see, whether it's really appropriate for the business community to shoulder a burden to pay for elections. Maybe elections needs to be paid, out of the general fund, and then we can readjust the fees that are being charged the business community based on that. But anyway, I would like to do a comprehensive review when I get into office to see, how we can look at those fees and adjust them so that they're as fair as they can be without placing an undue burden on the business community.
Well, Mr. Packard, is there anything else that you would like to talk about today?
Well, I would just say that, we need people to be vigilant if they're concerned about election integrity and election fraud. And I would like to encourage people, if they can, if they have the time, to be a poll watcher on May 24th for the candidate of their choice. We candidates are the ones that select the poll watchers for May 24th. I will be glad to appoint people as my poll watcher if they would like to serve me, but if they have other or serve on my behalf, if there's other candidates they like, I would encourage them to approach those candidates and see if they can be a poll watcher for someone else. But I would encourage people that are not serving as poll workers to serve as a poll watcher, just so that they can help promote election integrity in Alabama.
Thank you for calling in today, but unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for Plain Talk. For everyone watching at home, if you want more information about the upcoming primaries, make sure to check out Eagle Eye's website, eagleeyeauburn.com, and you can also find us on social media at Eagle Eye TV. I'm AJ Rivera. Thank you, and War Eagle.